Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Polaris Connection, your podcast that connects parents of autistic kids with industry expert and proven results. I am your host, Brad Broyles, and I'm here with my larger-than-life Dadzilla co-host, Nathan Palmer.
Brad, if there is one title I will own and wear proudly for the rest of my life, it is that of being a dad. I don't know about Dadzilla,
I like Dadzilla,
but I'll take dad any day of the week, twice on Sunday.
The great thing about my co-host, Nathan Palmer, is that you're proof that you don't need a plan, just confidence. That's all you need.
Love it.
Hey, Nathan, let me ask you, what do you call a bear with no teeth?
Hang on. Are we jumping into dad jokes here?
We're going to dad jokes.
I don't know, Brad. What do you call a bear with no teeth?
A gummy bear.
And on that note, well, listen, today I think you're going through all the dad stuff because our topic today is dads.
It is, yes.
It's something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. It's funny. When we started this whole journey into the world of caring for autistic students and just neurodivergence, I can't tell you, Brad, how many people I've met and done tours with, and one of the most common things I hear is, well, it's my wife that does all that stuff, mm-hmm. or, well, ask my wife because she kind of does that. And on these tours, we meet families looking for services. I'd say 80+% of the time, it's the wife that shows up, not the husband or the mom. And so, and listen, this is not an attack on dads. I wanted this to be an opportunity for dads to know how to show up and support in ways that maybe they hadn't considered.
Correct. And it's probably maybe the wife that's saying, hey, honey, you want to listen to this episode. I always say, there's that common joke. Remember on, my big fat Greek wedding, says how the husband's the head of the family, but the wife is the neck, And so sometimes we just wives kind of steer their husbands a little bit of like, hey, you probably want to listen to that. And that's kind of like our direction today is that, working with Polaris Academy, it is interesting that, like you said, we want the wives, we always tend to look at the wives, but there's a big part there that the dad needs to play. And that's our topic today.
Yeah. And listen, if you're a single parent household, that's okay. The stuff we're going to talk about today really still applies. We're going to get into relationships. We're going to get into parenting styles, play styles, and even some data, some clinical data to back up different approaches to parenting. So listen, if you're a single parent household, listen still. There are uncles out there. There are grandparents. And
we talk about the village.
We do.
Right.
We do talk about a village. And so everything we talk about today, don't take this as oh no, I don't have that in my home. Think of these as ways to gap fill or maybe even change some of your approaches in play and how you relate with your kids that might just influence that dynamic. So
correct. And we want this to spur how can I gap fill this within my own family, within my own village, with the resources that I have around me that can best support our autistic kiddos.
Well, now you're kind of wanting me to tell some more jokes. I had one lined up, but it got out of order and I need to line it back up again. So
wait, you're out of order?
Neurodivergence joke.
Oh my goodness.
My favorite still to date, and listen, I have a few others.
I walked into that. Oh my goodness.
I'm dry. They go quick, and if you miss it, just hit rewind. One of my favorites, though, and I think I shared it on another episode, but it bears repeating. My son told it to me. It's my favorite neurodivergent joke ever. He says, Dad, I went to the doctor the other day, and I don't know what an HD is, but my doctor says I've got 80 of them. I love it.
And I love how your kid came up with that.
It was great. All right, so listen, some pieces of advice. I'm going to just start right at the top, and then we'll kind of work our way through. One thing that I wish I could have told my younger self when I first found out I had a child on the spectrum was don't try to fix your kid.
Mm-hmm. We hear that a lot.
And this is generally even relationship advice. I don't care how many relationship books you read. They all in some way, shape, or form say your wife isn't a problem to fix. They want to be heard. They want to be understood and accepted, but don't try to fix them.
And I always run into that trap. I know that's more of a relationship thing, but my wife will come up with a situation. I always want to fix it right away.
Yeah.
And you see your family, you want to fix it real quick.
Yeah. And listen, it's nothing, it's how we're wired. And there have been lots of studies on this. And even think about how we play when we're young. So if Brad, you've done a lot of sports, we kind of call Brad sport, Coach Brad. He's got a big football background. But think about it. When we were kids, right, and we'd play games, if there was a kid that was upset because maybe he wasn't getting as much time or a turn, we wouldn't go try to coddle him or understand his feelings. We'd go, oh, give Jimmy the ball next time, let's just keep playing, right? We'd try to, if there's something that got in the way of the activity, we just want to fix it and get it out of the way so we can keep moving on with the activity.
Correct.
Contrast that with girls that play. When one of them gets upset, they don't try to solve the problem so they can continue with the activity. They want to understand, well, why are you upset? Tell me more. I want to hear more about that. And so it's just in dynamics of how we're raised. And so as dads, listen, if you're out there and your first inclination is, my kid gets a diagnosis, how do I fix this problem? You're not alone. It's how we all kind of approach it.
Correct.
But I can tell you from experience, there's nothing to fix. And the more you try to fix it and the more you try to treat it as a problem, the more your child becomes the problem, the more your relationship gets estranged, the more they feel like they're not good enough and not accepted, and the more you tend to not accept them. And so instead of thinking them as a problem to fix, just think of them as someone to understand and make it your mission to understand all those unique things about your child.
Well, and Nathan, I'm glad you brought this up. We talk to a lot of parents at Polaris and just in general. And most fathers and again, this is more catered to the men, right? Once they realize that I don't need to fix my child and I just understand them and I just want to be with them, all of a sudden their mind shifts. And they open up of, now I can actually become I can connect with my child. To where before, here I am trying to fix them, as that's my way to connect with them. To where if I just accept them and just be open to it, now I can find opportunities to connect with our kids.
Yeah. And listen, it's down to your style is parenting. When your child cries, you want to go, what's wrong? How do I fix it? Versus, hey, tell me more about why you're crying, what you're feeling. And we call this the Polaris Connection. This advice is as true for any relationship with a spouse as it is for a child, but it is about connection. It is about understanding and plugging in versus just your role of, how do I make this go away?
Well, and as fathers, again, we're talking about men for the moment, so we want to just do a quick discipline. We see something wrong, boom, we're going to discipline.
Let's make it right.
We're going to make that right. We're going to, sit up in your chair and, hey, we're going to make this to where, and I know you're going to get to this, of responding versus reacting.
Yeah.
To where we, as men, sometimes we react so fast. I know I do that as a coach or as a father. I see something wrong, boom, I want to react. I'm a Nick Saban. I'm going to jump in there and, hey, Bill Belichick this. We're gonna fix this right away, and you're going to run the right route. To where it's a little bit different with autistic kids.
It's a lot of bit different. And Brad, I did what everybody did when the diagnosis came through. I went online and I started educating myself, or at least I thought I did. What I was really doing was I was looking for an out. It's like, okay, what's the end game look like? What are all the resources? And I looked at the therapy and the interventions as a way to unprogram autism, as a way to remove it from my life or to mitigate it the best way that I could. And man, it's like trying to shape water. You can't. And so I will tell you that this burden went off when autism became an opportunity, like you said, to connect, to understand him better, to look at my son not as somebody that had something wrong, but as a child that was just different in a way that I didn't understand yet because I kept trying to fix it. I kept trying to separate the autism from my son. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And when I finally combined it, no, my son is autistic and he's on the spectrum. That is him. It changed to, okay, this is not something I need to fix. This is someone I need to accept. This is something I can embrace. And it was in that I discovered, and it's so weird to hear this now, all the blessings that come out of a neurodivergent child.
Yeah.
And you listen, if you're the early stages, I say the word blessing, you're like, what are you talking about? It's work. And it is. It's a lot. Parenting in general is a lot of work. But there are blessings that came out of that relationship with my son that I would have never had with my other kids.
Well, and that's kind of like the first step is acceptance. Just got to accept and love your child for who they are.
Yeah.
And that's, and it's hard sometimes, especially with men. We have this idea of what our children should be, like, especially with boys. You're like, okay, my boy is going to be this, whatever, fill in the gap. And that's what I want my son to be like, right? And it's hard when you realize that, hey, your child's not going to do that. It's going to be different now. And you have to adapt to it. So step number one is really to accept and love your child for who it is. And I know that might sound, simplistic or seems obvious, but we do fight that.
We do. And that goes to your point. You hinted on kind of the next area I wanted to go into, and that's responding versus reacting. It is so easy. It is so easy as a parent, especially as a dad, to be reactive in special needs. So easy, because 9 times out of 10, you're not getting the expected response. You're not getting what you want or what you expected. And think about this for just a second, Brad. Like, what do you do? Like, if there's something you want and you don't get it, like you don't get your way or you don't get what you want, how do you react? Like, what's your typical reaction pattern?
So as a 40-year-old man or as a 12-year-old?
Let's do both, because I have a feeling there's a parallel.
So if I don't get what I want, typically either I push back somehow, shut down. I either fight for it or I'm going to shut down flight.
Okay, right? Now was this 12 or 40?
Both.
Okay, that's what I thought, right? And so here's the thing. If you asked, what about your dad? When he didn't get what he wanted, what did he do?
Oh, man. He always got what he wanted.
It seems like it.
It seems like it, I don't know. Like, what does he? I would just say, I think he would just either probably the same thing. He'd probably argue for it, or he'd probably just turn away and say, all right, you guys are stupid, I'm out.
Okay.
So.
Right. So there's this thing we talk about, and it's overused sometimes, but it's the fight or flight response, right? Mm-hmm. When we don't get what we want, typically we get triggered. Now, as men, we don't like to talk about emotions a whole lot. I can tell you, I was emotionally constipated for most of my adult life as a man. I use that term kind of loosely, but and this is funny. I'd never really processed the idea that emotions are body sensations. They call them feelings because they're things you actually feel in your body. I always took a more intellectual approach to feelings, like anger is a state of mind, and sadness is
That doesn't surprise me that you would do that.
Listen, I live in my head a lot. And so I still remember reading these descriptions of where you feel anger versus where you feel sadness. I'm like, wait, what? I'd never paid attention to that before. And if you haven't before, look into it. Emotions are feelings because they literally feel certain ways. And when you reflect on what you don't get what you want, pay attention to your patterns because you're teaching those. And 9 times out of 10, what you do is a reaction. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a pre-programmed thing that your subconscious and your nervous system has already learned how to do. I don't get what I want, and so I shut down, or I defend, or I fight back, or I get passive aggressive, or I try to manipulate. I mean, there's a myriad of things out there. And then now look at your kids and pay attention to what do they do when they don't get what they want, and how do you react to them?
That's an awesome point. And then, we always talk about that. Behavior is communication. Mm-hmm. So if you think about the behavior that maybe I'm penetrating, like what am I giving out, mm-hmm. And then how does that trigger them? And then what behavior are they doing? And what did I do to trigger that, if any? Yep. And then how do I adapt to that?
So the difference between a response and a reaction is one is intentional and the other's programmed. Mm. Right. So right. Our communication in our body goes 2 ways. Our brain tells our body what to do, but just as frequently, our body and our nervous system tells our brain what to do. And that's hard to digest for a second, but if you think about it, when you get reactive, when you get mad, you're not thinking strategically. Your limbic brain's taken over. You're in fight or flight. You just react. Right. So there's 2 ways of communicating.
So then let me ask you this, Nathan, growing up with having an autistic son for the last, 12 years, mm-hmm. How do you control yourself so you're not always reacting to where you're almost causing the problem?
Best way I've found, and I'm not perfect at it by any stretch, but best way I found is to just ask the question, why are they doing this? And to not...
you would ask that question
internally to myself.
Oh,
no,
okay.
I could ask them, but Brad, when you're triggered, you're not going to consciously be able to give me a cohesive answer. Well, Dad, I'm doing this because I'm in a heightened, elevated state of my nervous system and my habit took over. I mean, they're not going to be able to do that. But my job as a parent is to understand. And if I can't in my head give a logical reason why what they're doing is making sense, then I don't fully understand. And then let me say that one more time. If I can't make sense of their behavior, where in my head I can go, oh, it's completely reasonable why they're doing what they're doing right now, I get it, then I don't yet understand. And our frustration as dads comes in, why are you doing this? Why can't you just do that? Why?
I don't get it.
And so out of that space of we don't understand, we get reactive. Why? Because we have a different expectation.
Or a different belief system that they should have. Right?
That we're trying to impose and force on them. And so what do? The same thing we're modeling. Mm-hmm. No, you don't understand. And they try to impose it back on us. And now we're in a clash of wills.
Through their behaviors, right.
And so how do we try to win that? Well, we're dad. And so we take this authoritative stance. So what do? They fight back. We're just modeling reactive behavior. And if we're going to change the pattern, even in a neurodivergent child, especially in a neurodivergent child, we have to understand where they're at. And that's where it can take some work. See, neurodiversity is an opportunity to really take a lot of unique paths of understanding. Because in their world, the fluorescent lights might be the equivalent of a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
And or like nails on a chalkboard, or chewing on cotton swab balls, or whatever sensory thing that you might make you cringe, right? And until we can get into a headspace where we can say, oh, if I were in your shoes having this experience, I could see exactly why you're acting the way you are. We are not in a position to respond appropriately. Mm-hmm. Now, once we're in that space and we can understand, at that point, we can now intentionally parent and choose to be with them, understand them, and help to guide them back out of it.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like it's a lot of experimenting.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to be open to the way you feel, the way that you act, experiment, and there's a lot of adjusting, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I wish I could go into, Brad, what the right answers are. And the truth is, I don't know, because they're different for every kid in every situation. But the key is, if you feel, I'm going to go into feelings here for a second again. So men out there, if you feel those body sensations, those feelings, if your chest gets tight, if your muscles tense, if your posture changes, if your tone of voice adjusts, there's a good chance you are reacting and not responding. And so some keys to take from that is if you feel yourself in a reactive state, if you feel that your nervous system has become elevated, take a second to reset that first. Some simple things, and this is not new advice, but just taking some breaths, asking some questions before you jump to conclusions, maybe taking a breather and coming back at it another time, maybe just switching the activity. If the thing that you're doing is causing frustration, switch gears or introduce a playful thing, maybe even tell a dad joke. Humor is a great way to reset. And until you can feel that nervous system reset within you, until you can get yourself out of that limbic brain, don't respond.
Which reminds me, what do you call a cow with no legs?
Ground beef. Hey, Brad, why don't autistic people like carrying cash?
I don't know.
They don't like change. But there is a new diagnosis out. Have you heard of it? CDO?
No.
It is like OCD, but the letters are in alphabetical order.
Folks, we can do this all day. So
probably shouldn't. Okay,
but we wanted also, if we can switch gears, about provider roles within as a father. I know we talked about this before, and I think our audience would be really, curious to hear, being a provider as a father.
Yeah.
And what that really means.
And again, this in our changing dynamic, there's a lot of people that can be quote unquote the provider, but I wanted to kind of switch the role on what provider means, because a lot of times in the traditional family setup, you have one parent as a provider, one is more of a nurturer, and they're just roles we fall into. They're not imposed, they're not stereotypes. It's just kind of the reality of some provide and nurture in different ways. The question I kind of asked myself was, what am I providing? And a lot of times we just think of, well, I help pay the bills. Mm-hmm. And I go, okay, but what else? Am I providing security, a safe place for them, not just physically, but emotionally? Am I providing play? Am I providing a sense of belonging or stability? Am I providing intentional moments to be a dad? You know, these are questions that I just throw out there for all the dads listening or any providers listening. It gets really easy to get into a role of, well, I provide for these things so that my spouse or partner can do these other things. And I just would broaden that question. Ask yourself, what do you provide? So like, Brad, I'll ask you as a dad, what do you provide?
Well, and at first, when I remember when we got married, excuse me, like, I think that it's normal for a man to feel like, hey, I have to provide financially for their family. When I got married, I didn't have a lot of money, didn't have a lot of means. And then, boom, my wife was pregnant within a few months after we got married. And I'm like, holy cow, how am I going to provide for this child? And right there, my mind went financially, And I think that's normal for men to feel that way, is like, okay, I want to make sure that my family has the best. And money is always the first reason. So, but then the older I get, and when I wish I can go back, and I think we all like that. I wish I can go back to the younger Brad and say, you know what, the most important thing, and it's interesting, if you don't mind me, if I can just kind of jump into this a little bit.
Yeah, jump in.
So I have 6 kids. My first child, I felt like, man, I got to provide financially for. But when he was younger, all he wanted to do was play. Now with our last kid, my youngest son, who is now 7, I finally realized that. It took me 15 years, 18 years to realize, wow, they really, yeah, money is important, don't get me wrong, that helps, but they don't really care. All they really want to do is play. That's all they want to do. And the funny thing is, the older I've been, the more I realize that that's what my teenager wants. That's really what my young adult wants. He just wants to hang out. And that's it.
It's funny you bring up play. I'm going to circle back to that in a few minutes with some actual clinical data on specifically with dads and play.
I love statistics. You know that.
But before I do, I think this idea of dads being involved deserves some time in the spotlight, because for whatever reason, sitcoms and comedies and TV shows, they portray the dad as this dumb dude that doesn't.
I hate that.
Listen, parents out there, when you're watching these shows, please point out that is not the model dad,
yes,
right?
I hate, and I don't want to get on a tangent, but I really do hate how media portrays men as dumb people.
Yeah.
Let
me give you some clinical reasons why being an involved dad, Brad, the way you were talking about, is so critical. So there was this Stanford psychologist, Dr. Sears, did a research study decades ago on 300 different families and took data on kids when they were 5 years old. And they took a lot of data. It was like a family study. 26 years later, a separate group of doctors from Harvard do a follow-up study on these same kids. And what they were trying to do was they were trying to find a predictor of empathy. Like what from childhood helped determine whether a child or a young adult was going to be more empathetic, basically have higher emotional intelligence, being able to connect.
So they're measuring emotional intelligence.
And capacity for empathy. So they found this data from Dr. Sears from 26 years earlier and tracked these same families. Where are they at 26 years later? And what was the greatest predictor of empathy when they were young adults?
Interesting.
Guess what it was?
I don't know.
The best predictor of empathy was how involved the dad was when the child was 5 years old. It wasn't the involvement of the mom. Now, there's other nurturing things and data from that, but the best predictor of empathy was the level of dad's involvement when the children were young. The more involved the dad, the more empathetic the kids and young adult.
Okay. So then
Not done.
Oh.
Then another group, okay? When these same kids will reach their mid-40s, so same group of kids, we're tracking now this same family, 300 families across 4 different decades. They wanted to find out, well, what was the best predictor of better social relationships in their mid and advanced life? So their marriage relationships, their community relationships, those that experienced increased warmth from their dads when they were 5. That was the greatest predictor of successful relationships in their 40s.
And I like how you say warmth.
Yeah.
That seems like trust and confidence.
Absolutely.
So to all the dads out there, how do we instill more trust and confidence with our young kiddos?
Yeah.
And well, just male figures, right?
Yep.
For those that live in single family households, what male figures can give them warmth and empathy at a young age.
Yeah, because now there's a reverse study. Okay, so a whole separate group of psychologists, doctors Blanchard and Biller, they did another study on 1,000 kids that found that those that had the hardest times with social relationships and even struggled with like grades, so intellectual performance and social performance, were those where their fathers were cold, authoritarian, derogatory, and intrusive. Wow. So it's not just presence, it's the style. It's right? The style being involved presence. And being connected. Mm-hmm. So listen, as a dad, be involved. Be intentional about being involved. We're great planners, right? We like structure. Plan time with your kids. If you don't plan for it, you will fill the plans with something else. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's heavy. Let's go into something a little lighter. Brad, did you know that Santa Claus is neurodivergent?
How can he be neurodivergent? He just
well, think about it. He wears white gloves, so he's got sensory issues. Things with him are always black and white. You're either naughty or nice. Okay. He can't help but check his list twice. And he does amazing things, and nobody knows how he does it.
Well, why do bees have sticky hair?
Why, I have something to do with honey, but I don't know.
Because they all use a honeycomb.
Hey, I got another one. So an autistic person was asked, hey, if you're autistic, does that mean you take things literally? He answered, no. That's a kleptomaniac. If you didn't catch that one, rewind, listen to it again. All right, switching gears. Unless you got another one.
No, there's one of my favorite. Why do the bananas go to the doctor?
I don't know, Brad.
It just wasn't pilling well.
Okay, so on the lighter note, let's talk about play for a second.
Yes.
So if you've been a faithful follower of the Polaris Connection, you know that we've really dove into the science of play.
I feel like that's been our biggest takeaway with the connection, of the Polaris Connection, is the style of play with children.
Yeah. In fact, we've talked to so many different therapists, and they really kind of focus on that. That mm-hmm. let the support people do their support stuff. Don't worry about wearing the hats of therapist and all the things. Just be there to connect with your kids.
You're not there to fix, just play.
And that's what they need. Yeah. So funny thing though, dads and moms play with their kids differently. And there's data on the style of play from dads versus the style of play from moms.
I'm excited to hear this.
Now, again, if you're in a single parent household, you can incorporate these other styles of play, but I kind of want to go through them. So the typical explanation is mothers are more educational with their play, right? So they tend to want to teach with play. They're more nurturing with play. And I remember like my wife, she would like have them repeat a word or look at a picture. This is a giraffe or this is an elephant. And the kid wouldn't respond, but she was like relentless. Like she would make sure she was delivering these content instructions to the kids. And I just wanted to like toss them or tickle them and, play games on the ground or make choo-choo sounds. And so that's not just me. That's in general. Dads tend to be more physical. Moms tend to be more educational and nurturing. And this is important because studies show that 2/3 of 2.5-year-old babies choose dads over mama's play partners.
And I always tease my wife about this. Like little babies, when they're first born, I'm kind of like, they kind of just want to hang out with the mom the whole time until they get to like, I don't know, 8 months, like 9 months, and then they become fun for a dad. And because I'm like, let's go, because now they want to wrestle.
And that's the thing. So play for dads is about fun. It's not for the moms. It's more about connection and purpose. It's more nurturing. And it's not that either one's bad, right? Because they
all have their roles.
They do.
Their purpose.
But it's funny because reading on that, a dad will shift games repeatedly with the kid. Like they'll play something, but if the fun is kind of wearing out, we'll shift to a different one and then we'll go to another one. For a child, that can be dysregulating, but it actually intentionally teaches them self-regulation because they know that with the shift, they still wanted to play that other game, but now you're moving to a new game. And so it teaches them to transition from one to another.
That's a good point.
So the play style is actually really important. It's also kind of helps them kind of guide them through more physical development and reaction. It activates different parts of their nervous system and it engages them in different ways. So creative play, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
And as you're talking about, one game I always like to play with my little kids is I'd have they would lay on their back and they would press their legs against me, and then I would lean against them, and then and I'm like, come on, push me off, and then they would push their legs against me. It was just something kind of fun that they would do, and obviously I would fall over, and just to kind of tease, and they would laugh, and it was just some way that I'm using their physical bodies or motor skills to kind of push and pull at a young age.
Yeah, I mean it's not necessarily intentional. We are the accidental occupational therapists for our kids. Like we're doing those physical play engagements. Doctors John and Julie Gottman, they're more kind of relationship therapists, but they've cited literally hundreds of studies that have proven the way dads play, not just moms, the way dads play, that style is linked to huge positive outcomes for both sons and daughters, intellectually and socially. So that kind of play is important. And if you think he's just being silly, let him do it. This style play is critical. It's important. And dads, huge call out, play with your kids.
Yes.
Go home and play with your kids. Interact with your kids.
One of the best play examples I love. Remember the show Liar Liar with Jim Carrey, and he had the claw? Do you remember that? And he would chase his kid with the claw, and it was like, oh no, here comes the claw. And they would run around. I guess, I read this later on, Jim Carrey got that idea because that's what his dad did to him. So he used that in the show, Liar Liar, because that's what Jim Carrey grew up with, his dad chasing him with the claw.
That's awesome. Look, it does so much good for the brain, for the body. It activates, your dopamine receptors. It gives you these positive memory styles. It creates connection and closeness. It fosters trust. Really, I think the end of the day, Brad, it's find fun in your family. Parenting's hard. And anybody out there that's got kids, it's hard. It's not all fun and games. I wish it could always be that way. Sometimes the fun requires intentionality. So plan to play, be intentional about play. Don't react, respond, and find fun, enjoy what you're doing. If you can do that, that is kind of the beginning of the pathway of connection. And in connecting with our kids, that's when we can finally hope to begin to understand them. And that journey, that one is full of treasures just waiting to be discovered.
Well, and I know I read somewhere that the best way to connect with anybody is through humor. Remember, we had a professional comedian that we brought on.
Yeah.
And we talked about that in any kind of like business setting or just family dynamics, if there's a way that you can find humor, that's the best way to start that connection. So if there's any way that you can just find a way to create a little bit of just laughter in the home, laughter at play, that's a great way to connect with any kind of person.
Yeah. So listen, if this has been nothing more than just a small motivation to be engaged, great. If this has helped to be a call to action to some of the dads out there, great. I wanted to put this focus because I think sometimes dads are overlooked. And I think sometimes we don't understand how we can really be impactful and make a difference. And I hope this has shined a light a little bit on how to approach your children, your family a little bit differently with intentionality, with purpose.
Awesome. Final dad joke, Nathan?
I'm fresh out of dad jokes, Brad, but I'll throw it back to you. Do you have any final dad jokes for us?
I always like that one is what do you call cheese that it's not yours? Nacho cheese.
We'll close it on that dad joke.
Yes, thank you so much for making us part of your day. Please don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a conversation that inspires connection, fun, and play. We want to give a big shout out to our producer, Jesse Palmer, and our marketing director, Dallin Davis. Until next time, let's do some good.